Welcome to the channel. This is Finx MTG here with a commander deck tech on the Lord of the Nazgûl Commander. This is a Lord of the Rings themed deck, and if you ever wanted to make a Lord of the Rings deck where you have a bunch of wraiths that turn into 9/9 power toughness creatures and swing at your opponents with these vicious wraiths, this is the deck for you. Of course, the Lord of the Nazgûl Commander enables this because whenever we cast an instant or sorcery spell, we make a wraith. And then if we control 9 or more wraiths when this ability is triggered, they all become power and toughness 9/9. And that's all of your wraiths, including your commander, which is then a 9/9 flyer. So this deck is a lot of fun if you like the Lord of the Rings theme. A little bit of build up on this, and then we go into the smashing. This is around a power level 7. Again, because it takes some time to build up, you need to survive. And we're basically using cards like Sleight of Hand. Did you see that? Like Sleight of Hand. To cast these to be able to build up your board by creating instants or sorceries that generate your 3/3 menace guys. And we don't do an infinite combo to get them all out on one turn. We're doing it slowly on other players' turns. The primary focus of this deck is playing at instant speed. We have 20 instants, about 15 different sorceries. That's a lot of spells to be slinging around. So the idea here is to have this at like a power level 7 to be more of a fair deck that wins with standard style magic with attacking with your creatures. Let's go back into how we enable all these giant wraiths to get put on the board with some of these cantrip spells that we have. So to start off with, we had Sleight of Hand, but there's a lot of these. Let's just spread them out here so we can see all of them at once. But again, we have Sleight of Hand, we have Peek. The basic idea of a cantrip, if you haven't heard of that, is you pay usually 1 mana, and it has an effect that's really irrelevant, but you draw a card. On this one, look at target player's hand. That's free information. It's very good. The key is always to, whenever you cast a spell, draw a card, and you can potentially draw into another cantrip. Preordain is another one. It's a regular example. We also have some that cost a little more, but we have cost reducers in the deck, right? So Blink of an Eye I like because if you kick it for 4 mana, you can draw a card. These cards, sometimes you want to hold on to this for when the opponent has something that's going to win the game or it's going to really have a major effect, and that's when you're going to cast this. You're not just going to cast this, oh, they cast a big creature or their commander and just return it. You need to save this for the important points in the game. That's part of this deck, is knowing the threat level and when you need to react, because you're holding back a lot of instants in your hand. Again, if you want to take a look at the details for the full deck, you can look at the deck list that I'll have in the notes, and that'll give more information with the different tags as to what the cards are and what their purpose is and everything in that regard. But a lot of these, like this one, exile target card from a graveyard. Somebody casts Reanimate, trying to target their Toxrill in their graveyard. Hey, I can just do this, make their spell fizzle, and also draw a card. And if my commander's out, I make a 3/3 Menace Wraith. Quicken. This one is very big because you can have huge turns with this. You can play your sorcery spells that cost 6 mana, and you can play them at instant speed because of this card. So I like that one. It's an enabler and also replaces itself. Jataxian Probe, you don't even have to pay mana for this. You can just pay 2 life. Always good because you have the information revealed about the player's hand, and only you have that information, not the other players. You can share if you want to. This one is great for the on theme. You're having a little birthday escape. You draw a card and the ring tempts you. And when the ring tempts you, it also helps out one of the other great themes in this deck, which we'll get to in a minute. But target creature gets +1/+0 until end of turn and is unblockable. I like to use this on my commander. If my commander is a 9/9 and I make him unblockable and swing in, that's a lot of damage coming in there that they won't be able to deal with. And sometimes I can swing in for the final damage, but also with the rebound effect, you can play this at the beginning of your next turn. On your next upkeep, you get a chance to just cast it without paying the mana cost. So that's 2 free wraiths right there. We also have cards like Snap, which are usually combo pieces, but in this deck, what it enables you to do is to pay 2 mana and then untap your lands and still have mana to cast additional cantrips or other spells. So it allows you to keep going. That's the idea of the deck, is that you want to keep going. So this is the main way that you're getting all of your wonderful little wraiths on the board. Again, a lot of these are instant speed, so you're able to play it on an opponent's turn, and that's when you want to focus on it so that your creatures don't have summoning sickness on your turn, you got to start swinging around for damage with these guys. You got to fling it at this guy, you got to fling one at this guy, because you need their life totals to get pressured so that you can finish it in the end. Now, the other theme of this deck, of course, since we're Lord of the Rings and we're doing Wraiths, we have to have, well, the Nazgûl. Special card because a deck can have up to 9 cards named Nazgûl. So here, because it's a Wraith, it also works with our commander. And this card is kind of amazing by itself. It's a 1/2 death touch. When it enters the battlefield, though, the ring tempts you. When the ring tempts you, put a +1/+1 counter on each Wraith you control. So the great feature of this is that the Wraiths actually pump up all your Wraiths that are made by your commander, and it gets pretty brutal to try and have somebody run through a bunch of death touch Nazgûl. And of course, if you're a crazy collector and you want to get all the different styles of art on these cards, you could of course get the 9 different Nazgûl like we have right here. Put those in different portions so that you can see them. But no need to do that, and you should really wait for a reprint because they're a little bit too pricey monetarily right now. But we also have this little sneaky guy right here, Glasspool Mimic. This is fun because when you copy a Nazgûl, you get all of the effects as that, as well as it being a Wraith. So this is a nice little trick card that you can have it enter as a copy of a creature you control. So you actually have like 10 Nazgûls in this deck here. So that's a lot of these death touch creatures. Nobody's going to want to attack you on the ground with all of your death touch creatures out there. So the cost to cast your commander is a little bit expensive here. Also, when you have these in your hand, guys, hold one back at least. If you have 3 of them, don't just instantly play all 3 of them. Hold them back sometimes if you need something as like a blocker if somebody does a board wipe, or if you want to get the ring tempting trigger so that you can put +1/+1 counters when you have more of your tokens out. So since the ring tempting you is a main mechanic of this deck and goes with the theme with the Nazgûl and the Wraith, I thought I'd just take a moment to go into more detail on how the ring tempting you mechanic actually works. So what happens is you cast a card such as the Nazgûl, which has the ring tempts you effect on it. You get an emblem, the ring, and you get the first step on the emblem, which is your ring bearer is legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power. So what happens there is you get that, and you have to choose a ring bearer, which is a creature. So in this case, I will then choose this Nazgûl as my ring bearer. If you do not have any creatures, you can still up the level on the ring. So what happens every time the ring tempts you, you go up one more level here. And you can see the little arrow here, which is the designation that you go to the next level. Once you gain a level, that level cannot be lost. It only goes up. And the 4th one is the top level. So every time it tempts you, it really only matters if it tempts you 4 times, other than the effects on the cards. So, for example, you play the Nazgûl. You get your emblem, the ring. You put this on marker 1. This is how I usually like to represent it. And with the pre-release, we got these little tokens. I will select my Nazgûl as my ring bearer. It will also trigger this to put a +1/+1 counter on each Wraith I control. And he has the ability that he's legendary and can't be blocked by creatures with greater power, which sometimes helps, right? He's a 2-power creature that can swing in and nobody can block with anything that's 3 or higher, right? So another idea of this is that if you don't have creatures in play, again, it still tempts the ring, but you won't have to choose a ring bearer. Another thing with this, normally you get scared when you make something legendary because if you had multiple copies of it, you would have to sacrifice one of them. So let's say we play a second Nazgûl. It triggers this ability on enters. We'll go to the second step on this ladder here. When your ring bearer attacks, draw a card, then discard a card. And we have to choose a ring bearer here, right? So we could choose this one, but he would have summoning sickness. So we don't really want to do that because we don't get the attack mechanic. So we can choose the same creature. He becomes the ring bearer. This goes to 2. This goes to 1 because you put a +1/+1 counter on each Wraith you control. If you had one of your Wraith Menace tokens in here, it would trigger on him as well. And then we can go to attacks here. When we swing, it will trigger when your ring bearer attacks, draw a card, and then discard a card. So you can see how this process works. The cool thing about this is that this makes it legendary when he's the ring bearer, but it's only looking for another card that has the exact same name that is also legendary. And so our other Nazguls are not legendary in the deck, and that's what enables us to actually go and put the ring bearer on these and not have it, cause a problem where we have to do the legendary rule and sacrifice one of them. So that was something to keep in mind if it comes up as well. Another thing here is that the third option doesn't really matter here. The second one's kind of nice. The trick is when you get to the fourth one. Let's say we went through that all those times. I don't know, these guys got killed. We had our ring bearer. He was big. He swings in for the attack. On combat damage to a player, each opponent loses 3 life. Sometimes they don't want to block because he has death touch. Also, if you had your ring bearer was a wraith with menace, or at this point in the game, you could be putting it on your commander, who can usually swing in for that damage. And if you're swinging in 2-3 times, 3 times means 9 damage to each opponent just from your commander attacking, not let alone like all the damage from your creatures attacking, right? So that can do a lot of work and helps with this deck where you have to keep pressure on your opponents. Don't just sit back and not attack. Always be attacking, always be selling, always be attacking, So there you go. That's the basic mechanics of how the ring and the ring bearer and the ring temps you work. Go into some of the mana ramp because we need to get our commander out, because obviously you see we can have some defense here, but the main theme is to get the commander out. We have the traditional Soul Ring, but we have a Lord of the Rings Soul Ring, so it makes it that much better. An Arcane Signet, Wayfarer's Bauble. One of the issues with this deck is, again, you're holding cards like Birthday Escape in your hand and you want to cast them once you have your commander and in rapid succession. So you end up kind of running out of lands sometimes. There's 33 lands in the deck. 36 if you include the MDFCs. But the thing is, you're not always casting all your spells and your cantrips, so you're not cycling through your deck like a bunch of other normal decks would do, right? You're doing that all in one turn. So sometimes you get a little mana short, and we need some cards like this for mana ramp. We have Inherited Envelope here on theme. When it enters, the ring tempts you. Add 1 mana of any color. Navigation Orb is exactly there for the reason I was speaking to about the issues with running out of lands. We have Sapphire Medallion. Now, if you think about it, if you have your traditional, mana rock, you tap for 1 colorless mana and that's it. The reason why Sapphire Medallion is so good that you cast 10 spells in 1 turn and they all cost 1 colorless and 1 blue, you get 10 mana off because every one of them is costing 1 less. So this is great for decks that you want to play a lot of spells in frequent succession. So then we have the Thran Dynamo. This is fun because it's tapped for 3 mana. Some people get scared of this card and they always try to kill it right away. Other people don't really care. But the idea is that you can get your commander out a lot quicker when you have this on the board. And if your commander dies, you need to get him back. Sometimes you need to pull out cards like this. Mana Vault. Well, this deck was pretty crazy when you had something like a Jewel Lotus in it and a Mana Vault, but we do need to get our commander out to really function at full capacity. So try to get the card like this, and this is really just to get your commander, or if your commander has died once or twice, very difficult to cast him, you usually need something like a Mana Vault. Talisman of Dominance. There's your standard mana rock there that does damage. We have a Bolas' Citadel. That enables us to combo off on a turn where normally maybe we wouldn't have any cards left in hand. We're top decking. Don't look ahead. Don't look ahead. Bolas' Citadel, you draw the card from the top of your deck effectively because you can play the card from the top of your deck. Play your cantrip, draw more cards. Also, a win condition on the bottom of this is that if you sacrifice 10 non-land permanents, which can be all of your wraiths, and you tap it, each opponent loses 10 life. So keep that in mind. It is another win condition. Sometimes with this deck, you have to push through that last bit of damage to actually get the win. Then we have Sword of Once and Future. This one's a lot of fun because it's basically giving you extra casts on the cards in your graveyard for your cantrips. And when you surveil, if you need a land, you can do that. If you're looking for a specific card to get you to the next move that you want to make in the game, you also have the ability to do that with the surveil mechanic. Oh, and then because we're on theme, we have the One Ring. This card, I would say you don't need it in the deck, but it is a huge help. It is a little bit high in monetary value right now just because everything's went crazy with the Lord of the Rings cards since they came out. When they came out, they weren't that bad. But again, the protection from everything clause on this is huge. So when you cast this from your hand, you get protection from everything, and it basically gives you a free turn, and you can survive. And that's the big thing with this deck. Sometimes you need to survive until you can build up your defense and your attackers. Also, drawing cards, also a lot of fun. All right, so we have a lot of those spells to get ready. And we also have the opponent's going into like some crazy spells and you got to stop them. We have your traditional Swan Song, right? So this is for somebody plays like a Phyrexian Altar that you know is going to be a sack outlet for a combo. You can give them a little Lord of the Rings Swan Song there to cancel that. You have a Stubborn Denial, which is great because in this deck we should have our commander out, and he is a 4/3 flying, so it should just be countering any spell for 1 blue mana, which is incredible. Glorious Gale is a card that I feel is very underrated, but I like this card. Counter target creature spell. If it was a legendary spell, the ring tempts you. Keep in mind with this deck, you may be susceptible if people do unblockable commander creatures. They can hit in on you for commander damage, and your little Death Touch guys, or if they have a flying dragon or something like that, it can get through and cause a lot of problems. If you see that coming, you can cancel their commander. You can counterspell it when it comes out. And you can also trigger the ring tempts you. If you have a Nazgûl on the board, it will trigger that as well. We have an Offer You Can't Refuse. This one I would not use for anything except something that's really going to make the person win the game or put it really in their favor. Giving them 2 treasure tokens is too huge. You don't use this on just anything. Delay. If somebody has a board wipe and you have a board full of all of these Nazguls and all of these Wraiths, you don't want that to happen right now. And the thing is, if it happens in 3 turns, you don't really care because the game should be over by then because you swing with all of your Wraiths. That's why I like this one. It's any spell that this can counter, and that's why it's so good. It gives you a little bit more time, and you know what's coming. Then we have a nice little trickster one here, Unwind. Unwind is countering a non-creature spell, but you untap up to 3 lands. Again, so this is something you can play. The opponent after you goes, you can play this, counter their non-creature spell, untap those lands. Then when the next guy's up, you still have mana for your Swan Song to counter their spell. So you can just keep it going, and each time triggering your Lord of the Nazgûl. Lots of nice counter spells there. Lorien Reveal, Lord of the Rings theme. This is actually a really good card. It's a common, and it's a couple bucks now to buy it. So the idea behind this is that late game, 5 mana, draw 3 cards is pretty good. I mean, it's not great, but you can draw 3 cards if you need to late game. The real key here is the island cycling. If you have this in an early hand, you island cycle it, and you can get your Watery Grave or your land that taps for both blue and black mana in this deck. Night's Whisper. You draw 2 cards and you lose 2 life. Just another way to draw additional cards and keep comboing off with more cantrips with your commander. And then we have Ring Sight. I feel like this card is really underrated. Ring Sight enables you to search for a card. It's a great tutor. And the idea is that when you are searching, you get to pick out whatever the situation deems is necessary. And you're going to be having your commander out usually the whole time this game. That's the main purpose, right? So when you search for a card that shares a color with a legendary creature you control, that should be fine. It goes directly into your hand like it's a demonic tutor, not a vampiric tutor that goes on top of your library and then you got to find some way to draw, or you got to do it on somebody else's end step. This goes straight to your hand. So you can draw into this, cast it, and then draw whatever you get after it. And that is why I like this card. It's really good here, and I usually get it to get one of my big spells. Something like this could work too. Raise the Palisade. Choose a creature type. Return all creatures that aren't of the chosen type to their owner's hands. So when you choose Wraith, and all of your Nazguls and your tokens are all Wraiths, everybody else returns all their creatures to hand. They have no blockers. You can swing in for a giant attack. This is one of the game-ending ones that we have in here. Sometimes the opponents get ahead of us, and we need them to calm down a little bit. So we play Damnation to destroy all creatures that can't be regenerated. Resets the board. Right after this, we usually play the commander and start going with our cantrips again to get more Wraith 3/3 menaces out. We also have Toxic Deluge. which is a little bit more powerful because it's only 3 mana, so you can get out earlier if you need to. And it gets around indestructible creatures because it gives them -X/-X. That's why it's good. It is tough to pay life with this. Sometimes, you know, you're getting hit with some damage and it's a little bit tough. So you can just burn this early on if you need it and then set up for the Lord of the Nazgûl to come out afterwards. You want to have the board a little bit cleared so that you can always attack with your Wraiths. Again, these have evasion. They have menace. So it's pretty effective. If there's not that many cards on the table that are blockers, you can swing in. Oh my gosh. Guys, shield your eyes. There's a reserve list card here. Look out. So you do not have to have this card in the deck, but it is a great card for this deck in particular, and that's why I love it. Time Spiral. It is a 6 mana cost blue spell that basically gives you a time twister, and you draw 7 cards, you untap up to 6 lands. So everything gets like shuffled back into the library. Your graveyard and hand gets shuffled in. You draw again. You have 7 cards. But the big thing with this and why it's reserve list is that you untap up to 6 lands. If this one is a little monetarily pricey, you can use Echo of Eons. That one has the same effect, except you don't get to untap 6 lands. The idea with this is that when I cast this card, I can usually straight go into casting another 4 or 5 spells right after this that are cantrips and really set up for a win that turn or the next turn. Echo of Eons, again, if you discard that one, it has flashback. So it's nice because there's cards in here with Surveil and cards that you just discard, or if you have too much hand size, put it in your graveyard, and then you can pay 3 mana and have that same effect. Seagate Restoration. This is just a great card. When I cast this one, I usually win the game. Draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus 1. You have no maximum hand size for the rest of the game, so you never have to worry about it ever again. Very nice card, but again, don't be scared to play this as a land if you're not going to get to 7 mana, right? Fabricate. I think almost every time I use this, I go to get the One Ring to stall and get 1 extra turn where people can't attack me and I can survive. That's usually what this is used for, but it's been great, and I have a lot of turns where I actually can use this and straight up play the One Ring afterwards because we're at that point in the game. Quantum Misalignment. Create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it isn't legendary, and it has rebound. Again, like the spell that we had before, the rebound effect is very nice. We cast this card targeting our commander, right? So now we have a second card that is a copy of our commander that's not legendary so that we don't lose one of them. And every time we cast a spell, we are now getting 2 triggers to make the wraiths. So we'll make 2 wraiths for every instant or sorcery we cast, which is amazing. But then when you think about it, on your next upkeep using the rebound, you can cast this spell for free. Again, it costs 5 mana. If you're casting this turn 5 or 6, then the next turn you're going to have 6 or 7 mana, and you cast this for free. You have 3 Lord of the Nazguls, and you have 6-7 mana to spend on everything in your hand. You should be getting enough to either go for the win on that turn or to set up for next turn for the win. This card's a lot of fun. You can also look at a card called, I believe it's Nanogene Conversion that I had tried in the deck, where you can make every card a copy of your commander or something similar to that. But that one gets a little crazy because you give your opponents 4/3 flyers at the same time. So you got to be careful. Okay, so there you have that. We also have some nice support instant cards. We have cards like Dark Ritual, just like a staple in every black deck pretty much. But the idea here is that you can get your commander out early. That's the main purpose for this. If you draw it later in the game after your commander's out, it can help play a card like Time Spiral or even Lurien Revealed or anything you need there. It's not really used for specific combos in this deck other than just playing more spells on your turn. We have removal like Resculpt. Exile target artifact or creature. They get a 4/4 creature, but if you're stopping their combo or if you're killing their commander, it is usually worth it. Soul Shatter. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the highest converted mana cost among creatures and planeswalkers they control. The great thing about this is that it does not hit you. It hits only opponents. It is an instant. You can cast it after you saw nobody had a spell that you needed to counter on the player before you. You can cast this card. That means that usually all of those individuals will have played their commander, or whatever creature card that they played will be the highest cost because they would have played the highest cost one on their turn if they could. Here's one of the MDFC cards that switches into a land. It flips over. You can flip and see what you get here. So the Hagra Mauling is 4 mana, but it's discounted to 1 colorless and 2 black. Just another way to destroy a target creature, but can also be used as a land. Then we need a way to win the game. If the board gets too cluttered, you're going to have to go for something like Cyclonic Rift, return all of the permanents to hand. We saw the other card that can return all non-Wraith creatures to people's hands. Pretty much the same effect. This one's just a better card in general. Also, if a commander is trying to kill you with commander damage, you can, for 2 mana, bounce it back to their hand when it's trying to hit you, which is nice. Rapid Hybridization. Troublesome creature, just destroy it. Give them a 3/3 creature, but trigger your commander. Smothering of Smeagol. Return target non-token creature to its owner's hand. The ring tempts you. And remember, when you're targeting people, when somebody's trying to put an equipment on a creature, usually that's a great time to hit them with Soothing of Smeagol, right? Like they just spent the mana to equip the creature, so they've wasted that mana now, and then they don't get the equip effect. So it works out pretty well. The other thing is that sometimes there's Swiftfoot Boots on the board, or there's Lightning Greaves, and these really end up being disruptive to that and leaving their commander or other creature open to attacks or hits. This is one of my favorite protection cards, Slip Out the Back. Only 1 blue mana, puts a +1/+1 counter on target creature, and it phases out. So when it phases out, it disappears. Usually I represent that by flipping the card over. I cast this on my commander when somebody targets it with something. Let's say they have a lightning bolt and they're going to kill my commander. Well, I'll put a +1/+1 counter on it, then I flip it over, it's phased out. The counter stays on it when it's phasing. At the beginning of my untap step, it comes back, it has a +1/+1 counter. I can still cast my spells on my turn, and it doesn't have Summoning Sickness, so I can attack with it if I want to as well. So it basically does everything you want to do in this deck, and at the same time it triggers making a Wraith. So this is great. Again, you hold on to this until they're targeting your commander, and then you use it. Same thing with Undying Evil. This one's not quite as great, but target creature gains Undying until end of turn. So this basically, it does die, but then it undies and comes back with a +1/+1 counter on it, and you can still use the abilities. All right, so there you have a number of the supporting cards here. We also have some other fun creatures that work with our theme, because we're casting a lot of spells on other people's turns. We have 6 or so counter spells. We have different removal effects that we're playing on other people's turns. So we have items like this, Wave Break, Hippocamp. So whenever we cast those spells, we're going to be drawing a card. With this one, we're actually making 1/1 black fairy creature tokens with flying whenever we cast our first spell during each opponent's turn. Whenever a fairy you control deals combat damage to a player, you can goad target creature that player controls. So this simple 4 mana fairy guy that's also a creature that people use as their own commanders is pretty good, because it basically has a bunch of effects for everything that we want to do here. We want to goad the opponent's creatures because we can't be taking too much damage this deck. We have to be aware that we have to survive for a while. And also gives us 1/1 flying blockers. One of the drawbacks of this deck, again, is that most of your creatures that you have here are on land. You're not really going to want to block with your commander. So this gives you those flying creatures that help out. Another trick that I had in this deck that you wouldn't think would be in here is Bitter Blossom. So the idea of Bitter Blossom, you make on your upkeep, you lose 1 life, but you make a 1/1 black fairy rogue creature token. Also synergizes with this card, which is a lot of fun. So if the fairy hits, you get the goad. So that's one synergy there. But also, you need these blockers. So this gives you early blockers. You don't have to have your commander out. Helps you survive. And you can stop those pesky dragons that always swing in for 7 mana and have crazy effects if they deal combat damage, right? Next card, Archmage Emeritus. Whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery spell, draw a card. That one is just great because all of our cantrips will then draw 2 cards. Talion the Kindly Lord. Whenever you play this card, you choose 2 for the number here, between 1 and 10. Just statistically, that's the best one. It was the best in CEDH, and it's just the best in everything overall. Whenever an opponent casts a spell with mana value, power, or toughness equal to the chosen number, that player loses 2 life, and you draw a card. So it actually pressures their life totals, and at the same time, keeps refilling your hand. Thief of Sanity. You can see how, look at all these card advantage engines that we're playing here. This one is a 2/2 flying. When it deals combat damage to a player, you look at the top 3 cards of that player's library, exile one of them face down, then put the rest in their graveyard. You may look at and cast the card for as long as it remains exiled, and you can spend mana of any mana type to cast it. The idea with this is that you're stealing instants and sorceries from your opponents so that you can cast them and trigger your commander. Also great if you find a removal spell like a Swords to Plowshares, which you would never have access to in this deck, but you can now play because this enables you to play spells that are white and that don't have, even when you don't have the mana that's blue, you only have blue or black, you can use them for white mana. Roaming Throne. Wow. Okay, this is a powerful card. This is really powerful in any decks that have these trigger effects. So when it enters the battlefield, you choose Wraith. This is a Wraith that has Ward 2, so it's already hard to remove. But if a triggered ability of another creature you controls of the chosen type triggers, it triggers an additional time. That includes your commander's ability here. So effectively, every time you cast an instant, you would be getting 2 Wraiths that you're creating. Also, Wraiths here. When the River of the Ring tempts you, put a +1/+1 counter on each Wraith you control, which again, it's a Wraith, so it will trigger an additional time. So you can see the synergies with this get a little crazy. Roaming Throne is just always a good thing to have on the battlefield. And then we have another little secret tech here, Titan of Ledjara. It does cost 6 mana, right? But you've built up a little bit at that point. And when it enters the battlefield, you choose Wraith, and it's a Wraith in addition to its other type. So it has all the benefits from that. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, you may draw a card for each other creature you control that shares a creature type with it. If you do, discard a card. Right there is a way to draw a lot of cards if you have 4, 5, 9 Wraiths on the board. Again, you should at least have your commander in this. That should at least be 2, and you're off to the races. Great way to refill your hand and also draw more cards on additional turns. We also have Call of the Ring because it's right on theme with the whole deck. At the beginning of your upkeep, the ring tempts you. Whenever you choose a creature as your ring bearer, you may pay 2 life. If you do, draw a card. So this is a lot of fun in this deck because basically it's guaranteeing to trigger all of your Nazguls that you have out there. Every time the ring tempts you, pretty much you're just doing this every turn. Yes, you're going to lose life, but it's worth it because a card is worth more than 2 life. So there you go. We also have a bunch of your standard lands in the deck. You got your islands, right? I didn't go too crazy with the mana base in this one. We're a 2-color deck. We don't have to go too crazy, right? So we have your swamps, your islands, and then we have your non-basics. Let's take a look at what we do have. Watery Grave, because we can fetch for it. We also have the island cycling card that can grab this one, shock it in. Morphic Pool comes in and it's a dual land. Bajuka Bog, because we need some type of graveyard removal. We do have Cremate, which was also one card that can be effective at that. Darkwater Catacombs. Tainted Isle. Ooh, Polluted Delta. Oh man, why is this such a nice one in this deck? I thought I was just putting your average cards in here. I guess I had another one of these. Polluted Delta to fetch your dual land there. Your shock land. Reliquary Tower, because sometimes if you cast the one ring and you're drawing a lot of cards, this saves you from having to discard a lot. And Command Beacon, because sometimes people like to kill your commander 3 times, and you're not going to pay, 9, 10, 11, 12, you're not going to pay 1,000,000 mana for your commander. So this is your only way to come back sometimes when it's those really late games and you want to bring your commander back into the game. You have this card as well. So as you can see, not too fancy on the lands. You could go fancier if you want. I find that this works very well. This deck, once it gets going, and because of the interaction, it is pretty strong. And if you play it well, it can do really well. My biggest problem with this deck has been taking a little bit too much damage, not really having a lifelink method of gaining life back, and running into problems with the mana. You could add more lands into the deck or more card draw to try and deal with that. I kind of like it the way it is. It makes it more of a challenge of knowing what to do when, which card are you discarding. You don't always want to discard your land cards when you draw a bunch and you have to discard down to hand size. So there you have a deck tech for the Lord of the Nazgûl right here. Deck's a lot of fun, and I like doing the Lord of the Rings theme, which kind of adds to the whole flair of the deck. We have interactions for all these different types of play, making our menace tokens, swinging for damage like the way Magic should be played, getting to play a lot of spells and interacting with our opponents. There you go. Would you guys build this the same way, or how would you do it? Would you do it differently? What do you think? Lord of the Rings. Hope you enjoyed. Have a wonderful day.